Chapter 8 Threading the Needle. As far as the laws of mathematics refer to reality, they are not certain. Let me do this right. As far as the laws of mathematics refer to reality, they are not certain. And as far as they are certain, they do not refer to reality. Albert Einstein. Was he just a PR guy? We don't know. Maybe. The world was shaking, and Ethan came awake suddenly groggy but filled with adrenaline. A flapping sound indicated a blind being pulled, and sun hit him full in the face. The shaking was Carl, kicking the bed with his booted foot. Before Ethan could do so much as get a breath, Carl said, "Sometimes things are done wrong on purpose. Sometimes by accident. But the end result..." Carl let the sentence hang. Then, "Get your shoes on. Meet me downstairs." And he left the room. Ethan wiped crust out of his eyes and felt a cloud of irritation growing in his mind. "Keep it up, I'm about to do something on purpose, no cap," he muttered. It took him a second to stumble out of bed. The cabin was certainly cold. It couldn't have been below 50 degrees, but it felt much colder. Ethan pulled on shoes and stared briefly out the window, shading his eyes against the sun. The trees were still there. The Siberian forest and its ferny summertime greens stretched into obscurity and wilderness. Ethan made his way to the metal staircase in the kitchen. It was a wide spiral stair. There was no central column around which the stairs wound. Rather, they slowly spiraled around down into the basement area, coming out facing the center of the space. There, Ethan found Carl standing in front of a blank rectangular chunk of rock. What a basement it was. All metal. A workshop of some type. A variety of mechanized components organized neatly against the circular area. Most of them were covered in burlap or something similar. The walls and floor and ceiling, except for the spiral stair, were mirrored. It was very disorienting. The basement was larger than any of the upstairs rooms, though not larger than the cabin itself. It had a completely different character to the cozy wood finish of interior surfaces above. This place felt like some German lab out of a 1940s comic book. The slab was offset from the middle of the room, and Carl stood facing that rock grimly. The cat was making a figure eight around his legs. "Here," Carl said, and handed Ethan a cup with 3 raw eggs floating in it. He held a similar cup, showed it to Ethan. It was also full of raw eggs. Before Ethan could protest, Carl sucked it down, swallowed, belched, and wiped his mouth. "I keep eggs here. They stay good 2 months or so. The refrigerator is tiny and solar. Drink them quick. You have lost health. The cat will puke after, and we will sleep after. These travels take a toll." Ethan was trying not to gag. "Man, I can't drink raw eggs." "Do it." What Ethan did was make displeased contortions of his face, but he abruptly noticed that, indeed, he felt quite hungry, and more than a little weak. He heard they drank eggs in gyms. He'd seen it before, but man, what about salmonella?" "I washed them. Shells have it. You wash the shell, the danger passes. The shell keeps cell life safe. It keep out the bugs." Ethan closed his eyes and choked down the glass. It was like a yolk-flavored conglomeration of phlegm. He nearly brought it back up, but managed not to, weakly stumbling to the stairs, where he deposited the glass on a step about shoulder height through the railing and took a few deep breaths. Carl laughed more jovially than Ethan had ever seen. "This is good for you. You will thank me." Ethan couldn't speak for a moment as his stomach reacted, so he focused on Carl's odd costume. Things had been too fast and confusing for him to notice what the older gentleman wore before, but he should have. It was a strange costume. There was a long jacket that stretched below Carl's waist and had a furry hood. He had thick pants on, and boots to just below his knees. The pants were tucked into them. He wore a gun belt, and there was a pistol in it. Ethan had no idea what kind. His hat was of the traditional Russian variety, ear flaps connected above at the top. It doubled the width of his head and made him look like a bear in combination with his already graying beard and the fur-lined hood. He held a substantial staff in one hand and now gazed at the blank slab of stone in the center of the basement. When you want to do wrong, imagine a stink on a soul. Wrong done without intention makes the stink after the fact. Of course, we do not know this, but they do. Blood on the waters. Yet they cannot be all places, even the senses they have. Limited. The cat looked up and made a trilling sound. Carl crouched down and scratched her behind her ears. He looked at Ethan. In that world, an amount of time that would feel like 2 minutes, or about that, has passed. That vessel, with your little strumpet, it is near, but should be over the hill toward its tower. It should not see us return. The tube thing, where Chloe is. Yes, listen. She knew she meant to do wrong, to me, to you. She is not as she seems. You saw her become afraid and run when I came. You saw them take her. She is working with someone or for someone. We may see them as we journey back. We may see them when we return to trail. I do not know. Why don't we get her and talk about it then? You do not know what you ask. Think, Ethan. If a day is 2 minutes there, what is an hour? The math wasn't too hard for Ethan, but it did give him pause. It's a month. Yes. A month here, an hour there. How long before it's too late? Carl looked at the ground. I do not know exactly, but it is most likely less than 28 days there, which is 56 years here. You have time, and it doesn't matter. You are moving out, and I will take you to trail. Spend a year learning. 12 hours will pass for her. You understand? And what if I get the cops involved? Tell them you took a woman. You will have hard time proving she ever was, Carl returned. Seems like you know something about her I don't. I know many things. Maybe you will learn some of them. Not if you kick me out. A grim smile found Carl's face. That is true, Ethan. I would like you to trust me. I cannot make you trust me. You have to do that on your own. To come back with life, this is the best move. We must be a team. Ethan looked away, then back at Carl. I have to trust you, don't I? It's not like I have a lot of choice. This is true also. Now, the cat. She will open the door. We will go through. You will stay beside me. A minute lost there is half a day. You and the pot of honey. You two have taken me from my preparations. I have lost momentum. Do you know what I do? You know I don't bet. So many are lost there. In time, none know who they are, but I know. I know who they are. You think I have lost no one close? Life is... It is hard. It is a mountain we must climb. We must overcome. Life is not how should it been. It is as is. We are how we are. Our fathers, they gave away the power, so we get help. But it is we who must do. We cannot leave the messengers do for us. The guardians cannot make our choices. Where there are peaks, we must climb them. They cannot be climbed for us. Do you see? What are you, some kind of white trash Russian Yoda? I have the chance to save my kin, but what obstacles they are. And some would not climb the mountain. They would be taken to its top, and as they are taken, they have lost their good and are become the dead. It is the dead who resist, Ethan. Of them, many. Of we, two. Well, there is me, and there is you. So you're saying, what are you saying? Some powers cannot touch some men. So some powers use men compel, who can compel where they cannot. But there is a way. I have been searching it. If we try too soon, if we do not plan, who I love will be lost, and your pot of honey gone also. Her name is Chloe. She told you her name is Chloe. Oh, do you know for sure? What is her father's name? Where does she live? What are the numbers of her phone? Ethan was silent. Carl continued. As I have searched, I have found many doors. Many doors. I know where there are hundreds, perhaps many hundreds. The cat, she knows. When she is good, there are rewards. This her pattern. A cat likes a pattern. A cat likes a routine. I have learned to use this. She seeks reward after reward, and this her routine. He scratched behind Slinky's ears, and she stood up on her hind legs, resting forepaws on his thigh and mewling like a beggar. Now she is ready for reward, for routine. Our hiccup from you in the trollop is not full loss. She will move quick, but as cat moves quick. Ethan, we must go through several doors today. We will be in that place exactly 4 minutes. It will be more than 3 days from when you broke lease. Listen, I didn't want to break the lease, alright? I got tricked. Chloe wanted to see what was in there, fam. No cap. I was fine not to know, I would have been months ahead. You have put me back. I do not know how far. Do not put me back more. Stay near. Talk less. Do not fall back. You do not have the antivirus. You do not have the firewall. It will require a leap of faith, and if you can follow me, perhaps you will grow in soul fast enough to find the antivirus in truth and mind as you will need. But if you do not, they will take you. Do not follow if you think you will trick me and run. Do that, and you will surely see the pot of honey very soon. But your fate will be hers. Yes? Ethan blew air out his lips and made a laughing sound that was pure frustration. Get me back, and let's teach me what I gotta learn so we can get the girl, eh? I get you. I got no plans for shenanigans. There is this I like about you, Ethan. You do want the good, and are not as much the coward as you may look. A compliment's a compliment, I guess. Carl held his gaze a moment longer and said nothing. Then he turned to the cat and pulled a bit of beef jerky out of his back pocket. He held it in front of her nose and gave her a tiny bite, which she swallowed greedily. He then pointed to the stone. Slinky looked up at Carl, glanced at Ethan, made a mewling sound, then grudgingly turned to the stone. She was seated in classic feline fashion. Her forepaws were in front of her, and her back described a half circle as her tail wrapped around to her front feet. She was a little fluffy organic spiral in her own right. Slinky stared at the rock slab in the center of a circular basement in a dacha in Siberia. Her eyes became half-lidded in the traditional feline expression of affection. She very slowly blinked at the stone wall and began to purr. Ethan couldn't precisely describe what happened next. The slab didn't change, but it was gone, replaced with a gloaming of the twilight variety, before or after dawn. It was like somebody turned a shape in the universe. He felt an electricity he hadn't noticed before, but now recalled must have been there when he and Chloe first saw that alien seed. Carl knelt down and connected the leash to the harness he had already placed around the cat some time earlier. He gave her another piece of jerky and scratched her behind the ears. Okay, Ethan, follow me. Do not wander. The cat jumped into the sky and became suspended in the air, floating, gradually rolling over the bottom edge of the doorway that was once a slab of stone. Carl looked after her, jumped in, and likewise fell into the sky at an angle, seeming to float in midair as he entered, quite literally, another time zone. It was confusing for the mind because Carl was going over and up across a ledge that had a different gravitational orientation from the dacha. He looked like he was falling over a cliff into the sky. Ethan remembered before when their vertical orientation had transformed to horizontal. Physical rules might be different through those doors. Come in at a right angle and things could be topsy-turvy. Ethan took a breath and jumped through, feeling everything change as he landed amidst the stones in the ravine from before. An observer would have seen flat rock turn into a shimmering portal to the basement of the dacha, a rippling like the Fata Morgana on the sea, or the false oases of the desert, eating up the far horizon. Then a cat came up and forward, stumbling as it landed on rock, and was immediately followed by an old man in a Russian hat and a thick coat on the end of a leash trailing the feline. Then came Ethan similarly, barely managing to keep from scuffing himself up as he landed. This way, said Carl, looking quickly around the sky. No strange cylinders incongruously floating like metallic whales breaching clouds were immediately visible. It is near. Remember, he said. They walked briskly through the ravine, the sea lapping at a rocky shore a quarter-mile behind. The thick air once again revitalized Ethan in ways he couldn't quite make sense of. He glanced briefly over his shoulder. Far in the distance, on some remote hidden shore, was a mountain shaped like a tree? Was that a cloud? He squinted, but couldn't really tell what he was looking at. The sea grows in strange ways now. What it knows is more sweet and more dark. But it comes ever inland, Carl observed. Ethan did not understand a bit of that, so he just kept his thoughts to himself. The sloping walls of the ravine were covered in green and rock, occasional vibrant flowers sticking out at odd angles. It felt quite Scottish, just as Ethan imagined the treeless hills in that northern realm to be. They had gone forward no more than 30 seconds, and beginning to really understand the import of his situation, Ethan hadn't said much. Abruptly, Carl held up a fist, turned over his shoulder, caught Ethan's eye, then pointed to a tree between rocks up the way. This is the next door, he said. How come the cat hasn't puked yet? This question, good one. Only when she breaks all connection, all resonance with doors. Like a skipping stone finally falls through the pond. Okay, I guess that's got a certain kind of logic. The cat purred at the tree, sitting as it had, and again somebody turned the reality Rubik's Cube, and there was a doorway into another world. Cat leash in his left hand, Carl unclipped the pistol from his belt. Careful. This place, it is often made of danger. Okay, I'm awake, Ethan replied. Through this portal was a dark, modern cityscape full of tall buildings and shifting shadows. Horizontal and vertical orientation did not shift this time. They just stepped from a rocky canyon on a sea that would have looked at home in Scotland into some dystopian miasma. The cat puked immediately, and Carl explained. Here we break. We don't want to leave it open here. Too risky. She is recognizing this place. After a moment, the cat regained itself and led them into an alley filled with broken bottles, a persistent smell of urine, syringes, and human excreta. Sirens wailed in the distance, and tents full of junkies lined the lane ahead. Ethan could see people shuffling like zombies, moaning, listless, deadness in their eyes. Women who were a shadow of their youthful bloom littered this dying street like a seasoning of despair. Windows in skyscrapers were boarded up or broken out. There was little to no traffic, and mixed in with the smell of urine and alcohol was a distinct chemical odor Ethan knew to be in the amphetamine family, though it was cut with smoke from some open fire somewhere. "This way," said Carl. "We are in our time again, but have half a kilometer to go." "So she acts sometimes, sometimes she doesn't." "It is routine and resonance," Carl replied. You know when socks have fuzz and you get a shock. It is like that. She keeps a charge until she lets go. She can be made to let go fast or long. So like you can't predict it. No, I can. Cats are dumb, but they can know things. She knows when we are done traveling or when we do a long many portal shift, and she can hold it in. It did take a while to learn that when she was little. Every portal. Blah! But now she is stronger and true. She holds grudges. Ethan, to say it truly, she can be obstacle. I wish I knew enough to do this without Cat. Oh. From the look the feline shot him, you'd have thought she understood. Carl picked up Slinky, and they continued until they found a place almost empty of urban decay. A slightly better district of town, but not by much. You could tell things were more gentrified here, though. The smell remained, but junkie camps had been cleaned recently. Street people hadn't cycled through again yet. Carl looked around, then pointed behind the dumpster. Ethan made no argument and followed. There was a narrow path between buildings filled with debris and funk. Carl gave the cat a bit of something to eat, and she purred, facing the long, skinny corridor. It changed again. Ethan could see a field of grass limned in massive pine trees, distant mountains, and tickled by wind waves that were a stark contrast to their present circumstances and quite pleasing to the eye. Carl was still checking behind them. He said, "Here, in this place, none must ever watch, or they come behind and are taken by the fallen when they follow. They are taken so quick." He spent a good 10 seconds more making absolutely certain none of the zombified homeless a block over were in the vicinity, then turned back to the portal. "We are clear," and he stepped through. Ethan followed quickly after, relieved to change scenery. What was that place? He was still looking over his shoulder at the rot that retreated behind them. "Portland," Carl replied. In a few feet they came to a pool hidden by gently waving glasses. In a few feet they came to a pool hidden by gently waving grasses. In the far distance were mountains, and there was vibrant color all around. It still felt like early morning or late afternoon. The tree mountain, the one Ethan had seen at the beach, was that it? Behind crags in the distance. "Is this home or the weird place?" "Breathe deep. See how strong is the air. It is the weird place," Carl replied. "Have you sewn a rip? The needle goes in one side, out the other, in one side, out the other. We are sewing." The cat sat and purred at the pool until the water rippled into a snowy hillside, falling away at an angle. Carl crouched down and the cat jumped into his arms. He fed her a bit of meat as he put away the pistol and zipped up his coat around the animal. "Be careful. This part is slick. The air is thin." Carl took a breath and jumped onto the ice hill, then slid a good 10 feet. Ethan followed quickly. He happened to look behind for an instant, long enough to see the doorway to Portland disappear as he came through on the mountain. He landed in extreme cold and suddenly understood Carl's heavy coat and hat. His sneakers were barely up to the task, and he slid twice as far as Carl did, having to dig fingers without gloves into snow that was sub-zero. "Help!" Ethan yelled, the word catching in his throat with the freezing, rushing air. Carl dug his staff into the snow and let himself slide down a few feet, using it as a brake. He reached out and caught Ethan's hand. "I told you, it is slick." The older man helped the younger toward an outcropping of rock. He pulled out Slinky and she sat, fur fluffed. It took longer than Ethan would have preferred this time. Perhaps the cat had trouble concentrating. He knew he did. Then there was a steep corridor of twilight violet, a cave, but the roof had millions of glowing things, some sort of insects, and a putrid, sick, sweet smell came out. Carl opened his mouth, yelling above a sudden and vicious freezing wind. "Make no sound here, and do not have fear." "Okay." Ethan shivered back. In went the cat and Carl. Ethan followed fast behind. This cave-like area was circular. Glowing bugs or something impersonating them provided scant illumination. It was quite claustrophobic, and when Ethan touched one of the walls, it crumbled. Carl's hand gripped his shoulder fast, and he squeezed. When Ethan turned to him, Carl was bugging his eyes out and shaking his head. Motion near the wall he had touched caught Ethan's eyes. He saw a ripple of energy that sparkled like a purple wave in sand. It swiftly undulated across the entire corridor. Carl grabbed his arm, picked up the cat, and they practically ran. There were many corridors. They crisscrossed one another and were all quite claustrophobic. Flies were everywhere, big, fat, nasty flies the size of a thumb. They buzzed deep and menacingly. The tunnel abruptly gave on a large, spherical, empty space. It was like looking into a half-checkered soccer ball. Other tunnels equilaterally dappled the area, but there was a notable cavern between them. Carl stopped Ethan, pointed to his own eyes, then to Ethan, then leapt out into the space. It was like a spherical gymnasium, and the cave came out in the middle, not the bottom. Imagine a chamber in an anthill made to the scale of a man. But that wasn't the wildest part. Carl was flying, or rather, Carl was gently floating toward the bottom of this spherical area, following the trajectory of his leap. There was an uneven area next to a tunnel facing down, and this was the objective. Ethan felt a wave of fear and nausea come over him, and the only thing that gave him courage to follow was the fact that if he didn't, he'd be left in this place, and it was a horrible place. He jumped out and felt himself falling, though he was moving slow. That feeling when you trip or miss the last step, that was what went through all his body, a tingling thrill starting in his bowels and shooting through his extremities, a cloud of internal butterflies taking control. Yet, despite the thrill, he fell slow as a feather on a windless day right behind Carl. The cat had the portal opened even faster this time. It was another door in the floor, as it were, like the first one in the Green and Rocky Canyon. Carl and Cat went through. Ethan floated right behind them until they all landed in a heap on a dune. When Ethan looked back through the portal, he saw things. They were approaching ponderously and silently from dozens of entryways into the sphere. They were just shapes, but they were living shapes. Shapes like creatures out of a science fiction nightmare, fraught with pale-skinned, black-eyed ETs. But it was too dark behind for him to make out real detail. However, he could see enough that he felt cold inside, even though their new domain was hot as a sauna. They were on a dune of the classic sort one expects from the desert. Just down the side of the dune, maybe 15 feet away, was an oasis of palm trees. The portal was in the sand. Carl gave the cat a huge slab of beef jerky for the previous excursion, and the animal chewed a solid 30 seconds. Ethan looked back nervously at the chamber they had come from. "Can they catch us? Like, what are they?" "You will know later. Not now. Now we are in our world. In our world, without their vessel, we are many, many times faster. Let the cat chew." "Sure, okay, yeah." The cat chewed, then looked at a palm tree and purred. A segment of the palm disappeared, becoming the grassy hillside they had first seen that morning. Ethan followed Carl through, and they were on the mountain path he and Chloe first observed. He looked toward the ravine and could barely spy the spot Carl and he had escaped through a day ago and re-entered this morning. Though only 5 or 6 minutes had elapsed in this world since then, too, as Carl and Ethan slept in the dacha, the rest as they did their world-sowing action. It was a very short walk, and they were in front of the stone slab that had closed Ethan and Chloe off. The cat sat and purred. "We had to go through all those places just to come a few hundred yards? Climbing up takes 15 minutes for me, 5 minimum if we are rushed and we're lucky. You can waste a week. I can't. Maybe I can. Either way, I am angry. I must. Because of you. But you. Can you lose a week?" "Weird," said Ethan. "Weird, but I get it." As before, the world shifted, but this time Carl looked wary as he stared at the portal. Surges of energy interfered with its clarity, and they could see themselves through it. There was a bent mirror in front of the portal. It had a spiral quality to it, as though the mirror were some sort of frosting in a Little Debbie snack cake, or a rolled up bit of aluminum. It was cylindrical and stood vertically. No mirror was in that little cabin when Chloe and Ethan entered the basement. "Not right," Carl said. He looked at Ethan, and then at the mirrored flickering entryway, and then he exhaled. "We lose time here, and so does she, and they... Your fear will be smelt. We cannot wait. We should wait. We cannot wait. If it is as I think... Ethan, will you do as I say? Aren't you going to kick me out? How about I just run off when I get there?" "Sure, you could. If you do, your little pot of honey, she will be lost forever." Ethan looked at the rocky trail on which they stood. "You say that, but how do I know?" "Stay here if you wish." Okay, I'll trust you." "Do not betray me." "Whatever, I just want to figure this out." Carl sighed. "Ethan, young one, I told you she was evil." Letting the enigma hang, he stepped through with the cat. Ethan followed almost at the same time, heart racing. There was a clatter, the sound of breaking glass, reverberating metal, and bright lights everywhere. A spark shot up and out. Abruptly, Ethan heard voices screaming from somewhere above. The mirror had come crashing down. It was a mixture of metal and glass for maximum reflectivity. There had been some sort of technological equipment behind the reflective glass, focused on the portal entrance. When they came through, they knocked that over and sent an electrical surge throughout whatever connections gave power. Footfalls above got louder. Carl looked at Ethan, at the cat, at the portal behind, and then at the stairs to his bedroom as the noise increased. He handed Ethan the cat, pulled out his gun, and bit out, "They cannot find the door. They were trying to open it. You led them here." "I didn't mean." "They will follow me. Run with the cat to the street, past 50 feet. Let her barf." And he ran up the stairs with his gun. Ethan didn't know if he could do that, but in a moment he remembered Chloe and thought to himself, well, like this old fart said, it's an obstacle on a mountain, ain't it? She can't be that evil. Carl exploded from the stairs through the trapdoor, which was propped open. He fired several warning shots into the ceiling of his own house away from the skylight, where plenty of wooden infrastructure would prevent the bullet from going totally through. There were two men with sunglasses, earpieces, ball caps, jeans, and flannel shirts in his bedroom. They had been running for the basement access hatch, doubtless having heard the crash, but Carl's explosion from below surprised and interrupted them. One was startled so thoroughly he jerked into the bedroom's desk and knocked over a chair, scrambling away. The other started stuttering code words into an earpiece and about-faced to retrieve his gun, which, by some twist of grace, happened to be in the kitchen and not on his belt. Carl managed to catch him around the legs, so he fell in the middle of the living room. By this time, Ethan had come up from behind, terrorized at the gunshots and even more keen on escaping. He kicked over the man who had been bamboozled by the chair and ran past Carl out the front door, gripping the cat. He made it a good 40 feet when a man with a square jaw and a Roman nose right under his forehead seemed to appear out of nowhere. A man with a square jaw and a Roman nose right into his forehead seemed to appear out of nowhere with a fat gun. "Where's the Chloe kid? What did you do with her?" Hey, I didn't do nothing. No cap, I swear. I want to find her too. I'm on your side, man." Roman Nose came right up to him and put the gun to his chin. "Is that just the unvarnished truth?" he said. The cat started making a noise. "What's she doing?" "Oh, she's gonna barf." Slinky obliged, regurgitating beef jerky all over the man and causing him to fumble the gun. In disgust, he pulled off his jacket and incidentally knocked his own earpiece out. Ethan could hear the men inside the house yelling, panic. "We got a situation here, Farley!" Blam, 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 blam! Gunshots. Carl loudly burst from the kitchen door and faced the hill and careened over the Carl loudly burst from the kitchen door that faced the hill and careened over the green railed deck, falling a good 15 feet to grass below, but managing to land it in a roll, stumbling back to his feet, and, as steadily as he could manage, aiming the gun up at the deck. "I won't miss again!" he yelled. The old man looked across the dirt alley, saw Ethan and the guy with the earpiece and the Roman nose, Farley. Farley had been startled as well, but had recovered his gun quickly, using one hand to grip Ethan behind the neck and the other to aim. "Drop it, old guy!" Carl turned and the government man fired a round near the grassy ground where he stood. Ethan winced. A high-pitched ringing had invaded his head. He was astonished how loud guns were. He hardly even noticed the cat's claws digging into him. Carl exhaled, lowered his own gun, and yelled out, "Ethan, did she barf?" It took him a second to register what Carl said through the ringing in his ears, but he was able to figure it out. Ethan yelled back, "She barfed!" "Shut up," Farley injected, then pulled a phone from his pocket and hit a button, yelling into it, "Hey, don't send any black and whites. It was a non-damaging weapons discharge. False alarm." The voice on the other end said, "We heard shots all the way at the station." "We got it. ACAE. Sorry. We got it. ACHE jurisdiction anyhow, huh?" "Okay, 10-4. Ethan screwed up his face. ACHE. Ache? Farley pocketed the phone, let go of Ethan's neck, and grabbed him by the front of the shirt. "I'll ask the questions. You're gonna tell us what you did to Chloe. Pervert." "Hey man, this is not bussin'. Listen, I'm telling you, I didn't..." Farley made a fierce sound like a bark. Bah! Then slapped him across the back of his head, hard enough to rattle his teeth. As the daze scrambled Ethan's brain, Farley began dragging him back to the house. Slinky got away during this exchange and ran with her leash dragging in the dirt to where Carl stood in the grass. Another armed man in jeans, ball cap, sunglasses, earpiece, and flannel had come out of the kitchen with a weapon trained on the old man and his animal. There were three men in flannel and jeans, and their Farley Chad leader, 4 total. This was the principal thing on Carl's mind at the moment. He knew where present events were headed. In a moment, he looked up at the man on the deck who had just come out of the kitchen and said, "Can I pet the cat?" "Don't move, old-timer." Okay, said Carl. The cat pressed herself into his shins, wild-eyed and uncomfortable, half-heartedly grooming herself from the vomit on her fur.